last.
Yeah.
Huh?
Okay.
Astoria, Oregon. Yeah. Four of us.
How long?
Fine. Yeah, no, in middle August. Middle August.
Should gotta be perfect if there. And friends that were managing my house. District office.
Yeah.
Right there. They said,
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting of the Paso Basin Cooperative Committee to order and ask you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do a quick roll call. Committee Member Dodds.
Present.
Thank you, Committee Member Gibson. Here. Thank you, Committee Member Hammond.
Here.
Thank you, Committee Member Turrentine.
Present.
Thank you, and Committee Member Merrill. Thank you. Item number 4, a couple of housekeeping. It's up to the chair. Chair.
We have a section for public comment coming up here shortly. No, we can hear that comment during public comment. Go ahead, Mr.
Okay.
That's illegal. If we follow the ground. That family said at the very first meeting. The point of order always.
I don't know what the point of order is.
Yeah, I don't either.
We don't have an attorney here either.
We can hear the point of order, and make a decision from that.
Why don't you go ahead and let him make a
Okay, sure.
comment?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Jerry, let me make sure you're unmuted. Jerry, first, let me make sure you're unmuted there. Second. Okay, now go ahead. You're good.
I'm on?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Murray Powell, Templeton resident. I'm also a member of the PBCC Monitoring Committee. I got a point of order here. There seems to be a lot of public confusion over the fact that all of a sudden this committee has grown from 4 members to 5. And I'd like an explanation from the committee. I guess there's no legal counsel here, you said, but I'm not quite understanding, and other public members of the public are not understanding why the EPC water district has been seated without any formal action done by the committee itself. So I appreciate an explanation of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will be discussing that later in the agenda here.
A couple of housekeeping items on the agenda item format. We will have each item, there will be a staff presentation followed by a public comment. And lastly, discussion among the committee members, which the chair will facilitate. During public comment, each person will be limited to 3 minutes per person. We'll be tracking that here, and there will be a light that lets you know when you have 30 seconds left. The yellow light will show. And then also, if you're on Zoom and have a public comment, please use the raise your hand feature. If you're not on Zoom and calling in, let us know with your voice, and we will make sure that you get your comment addressed. And then lastly, we ask those 2 folks on the Zoom to avoid using the chat. Again, not everyone in the room is privy to that information, and to be transparent, we ask that you make any comments during the public comment portions of the agenda. And if you're in the room, we would ask you to mute your cell phones, which I will do myself, to make sure that we facilitate a smooth meeting. Thank you, guys. Oh, yes. I'll just make a note. Typically, we have a video for those on Zoom. We had to do a little computer switch today, and so folks participating on Zoom won't be able to see the video, but next time we'll have that remedy.
Great, thank you.
But they can hear us.
They
right?
can.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next agenda item is a brief welcome to the Estrella El Pomar Creston Water District. And are we taking public comment on right now on this?
Do you expect a presentation or do you want to do public?
Sure, I can make a brief presentation first. So I'm just going to kind of gloss over some of these details. The EPC Water District was formed back in 2017 and was not formed in time to make its original election as a GSA. And because the basin needed to be entirely covered by GSAs, the county covered those areas within the EPC's boundaries. However, it was contemplated that that might change at some later date, and the MOU was drafted originally to allow for a fifth GSA, and actually at the time, Heritage Ranch was a GSA. Next slide, please. There's a board of directors of the EPC Water District. Dana Merrill's here with us today as the representative to the PBCC. So this is basically what I just already said. Thank you. And a timeline. Next slide, please. So this map shows the 4 GSAs and their coverage areas prior to EPC's participation as a GSA. And then this map shows the EPC coverage area in green. Next slide, please. So I think what was important to kind of remind all of us the structure here. So the voting as laid out in the MOU is with these percentages. So the voting percentages and the contribution percentages, the allocations of costs are the same and are unchanged for the city of Paso Robles, Shannon San Juan Water District, San Miguel CSD. And really the only switch is that the Estrella El Pomar Creston Water District is now paying its share and has the same commensurate votes. And that is a decline then in the county's percentages. Next slide, please. So then these notes at the bottom here are important. So the voting threshold for all normal decisions is 67%. And then there are a couple of scenarios where any changes to the GSP or any changes to the MOU, which of course are not made by this body, but recommendations from this body to each of the 5 GSAs, which are independent agencies, those recommendations are required to be unanimous. So this slide basically shows the coordination structure where each GSA is its own independent GSA. We cooperate under the MOA here at this committee. This committee is managing the implementation of our GSP at this stage and handling stakeholder engagement, technical advisory, and coordination. Next slide, please. Okay. Any comments from my committee members, and then we'll open it up.
Let me just, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was a clear recitation of the facts of the GSA situation. Let me just emphasize, as you remarked, that in the county's adopted strategy of implementing SGMA, it had long been contemplated that Estrella El Pomar would create itself as a water district and become eligible to be a GSA, the timing of which they were not able to apply directly to the state for that status. But the MOU, in answer to Mr. Powell's question as to how they appear now as a member, full-fledged member of this committee, comes from action taken by the Board of Supervisors. And I believe you had it up there May 22nd or 23rd. Can't remember the exact date of that action by the board to relinquish its authority as a GSA in those parts of the basin that were covered, that are covered by EPC. And the MOA that governs this committee explicitly by its black letter language contemplates the joining of EPC with the vote percentages that you see here. And so it was simply the action taken by the Board of Supervisors that was all the necessary action needed to now seat EPC at this table. And I welcome their presence. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for the, it's been a number of years to get to this point, so this didn't just happen overnight. And a lot of us work real hard, and we intend to keep working hard if we want to be, team players and work as hard as we can to get this basin balanced. And we don't have an awful lot of time to reflect on how nice it is to be at the PBCC, because there's a lot of work to be done, and we want to keep working on that. And I think that there's plenty of opportunities with committees, with the GSAs. I mean, folks that want to get involved, there's plenty of opportunity. I do think that having run our own water district for a few years now and adhering to the Brown Act and all of the rules for meetings and auditing of operations and so on, that's been good experience for us. I mean, it certainly gives me a little bit of an inkling of what the broader members have to deal with. And so anyway, we're looking forward to it and want to roll up our sleeves and go to work. That's the story. I've lived here a long time, own land here, I farm here. My kids go to school here with Paso, Robles, Templeton, Atascadero. We've been all over the place. The place means a great deal to me, and it does to the members of our water district. And we want to see the place succeed. We don't want to see anybody run out of water, and we want to be able to intelligently decide on what options we're going to pick and what can we afford and what are we going to do moving forward. So I would encourage everybody to let's try to be constructive and get it and work positively to get an outcome we're all happy with. That's what we're interested in.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome Dana too and his board. I mean, I know you guys have been working all along ever since we've been together doing water here. Just that you were on a different umbrella. Now you're on your separate umbrella, so to speak. So, through the MOA, I think we all work together to the perfect end, which is to make sustainability of our water source. But again, I think that, having you on board as a member is going to be more stronger as a voice. And again, it's going to be more cohesive as what we're going to be doing. And I think it can only help and benefit the basin, I hope. So thanks for being on board.
Kelly, any comments, or can open up to public comment?
I just want to say welcome aboard and look forward to working with you guys.
Great. Okay, Taylor, we'd like to open this up for public comment.
Yes, thank you. Looking for any public comment from the audience?
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg Graywall. The document I just gave you is the February 21st, 2019 LAFCO with regard to condition number 11 that was never met from the original application. Because that condition wasn't met, they were in a 2-year timeout, and after 2 years, they had to come back, and the condition reads, and all you have to read is number 5, which I highlighted. And this is also in ink and what you need to know, because this is the most current. The EPC shall not become a member of the Paso Robles Basin Cooperative Committee of status under the current MOA. There's no gray area there. We have 3 adjudicated members up here, We have two that were voted out by AB 2453 and then came back around the fence. We have all five that are members of the prior agreement. We've been waiting 20 years of wasting time and kicking the can down the road and lying to the public about what you're gonna do. The documents you signed that were in this thing were signed on May 10th of 23, and the meeting was on June 6th at the BOS. How did you know a month ahead of time that you were gonna get voted in? Must have been a Brown Act violation there. We got a lot of false statements. How you gonna kick in the contributions for the time that you missed? We've already spent a lot of money on getting this far, and because of your false allegations and committing fraud by adding yourself with the help of Willie Kuna and Dick McKinley, who's no longer here, you put yourself on an application to get $1.5 million from the state for our GSP. And then that all had to be redone because it was fraud. Says right in the application. And none of the money was spent on the basin. It was all spent on putting together your GSAs and your water districts for your personal gain. Nothing for the representative. Nobody represents the citizens that live over the basin that voted. They didn't want your representation. I don't know how you think you're going to work on. Shannon San Juan tried to make you a GSA partner, which was illegal. No such thing. You missed the date from the state. You don't have recommendation from the DWR. You got a Brown Act violation for going into closed session 5 times to circumvent a group that you call the cooperative group. I don't know how you can have cooperation. I'm sorry I'm boring you, Supervisor Gibson. I find it really amazing how nobody else matters except for the people that created the problem over the basin. If you're using 90% of the water, guess what? You're the ones that are going to cut back. Nobody else. And we're over it. The people that live over the basin have the priority right. Not the cities, not the CSDs, not any of the special agencies. You're not even a legal water district. You don't even meet the water code. And when you don't have a system that works, we're going to talk about that later. Then we'll see. You want taxpayers to fund it.
Thank you, Mr. Graywall.
Any other public comment?
Hi, my name is George Tracy. I live in San Miguel. And I come to this meeting not having read the agenda items, but I did read in toto the grand jury report on the Paso Basin. And I have a lot of faith in the grand jury, having been on the grand jury for 3 years and being involved in investigations, including the one for the Paso Robles School District. The amount of money that you people are spending on this is considerable. If the reports are accurate, you probably have spent over $10 million already on getting to this point. The fact that another group wants to get involved and is willing to really pony up a third of the money to run this group is impressive. But the fact of the matter is, they were kicked out once before, and how they're coming back now and saying they want to join and they're willing to put up a ton of money really impresses me, that they are looking to buy their way in at the expense of everybody else in the basin. I've lived in this basin for 20 years. I've had to drop my well pump once. I dropped it from 250 down to 520. And the last time I checked it, I had about 200 feet of water over the top of the pump, which is not good, because when I started with this property, I was only down at 187 feet. That means I've dropped water levels almost 200 feet from the time that the well was installed to now. And it doesn't appear to me that anybody is talking about how they're going to maintain the water level here. We're all talking about stuff that is administrative and money and stuff like that. But I have yet to see any plan that says how you're going to maintain the water level. if the grand jury report is followed, something should happen. And it should happen now rather than waiting to 2040. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan Duckworth, a rural resident of the Paso Robles area. And I'd just like to comment that when that point of order was raised, I am absolutely appalled that nobody on this board seemed to have a clue what a point of order is. I learned about it in high school. How come none of you know anything about it? If you're a governing body, you should. Every one of you needs to get a copy of the the Robert's Rules of Order and read it. Learn how to run a meeting.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Just checking online. Okay, does not appear to be any other public comment.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then the next item is actually more public comment for items not on the agenda.
I might. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, members of the board. Ann Myrie, I'm a property owner, irrigated property owner, along with members of my family in the Shandon subregion of the Paso Robles subbasin. I'm here to talk to you just a little bit about an issue that's been nagging at me, which is the word equity with regard to water. I noticed that the Paso Robles City Council brought that topic up and had some concerns also about water equity. And I would suggest to you, at least 20 years ago, GEI and probably others began to identify the 8 subregions of the Paso Robles subbasin. And in this particular 2011 report, they discuss hydrogeology. The suggestion is that subregions vary geologically and probably should be managed differently for water sustainability. And that's what I want to remind you is subbasins should be managed differently for sustainability because they have different characteristics. And I think with TAC meetings beginning, it's time to think about that. I'm pretty sure there's nobody in this room that hasn't seen this map many times. And in these reports also, there were minimum thresholds. This particular addition is the groundwater management plan for the Paso Robles Basin, February 2011. So I have a little knowledge of this because we've been in irrigators in the Shandon sub area since about 1947 or 1948, continuously irrigating all those years, initially pasture, then potatoes, sugar beets, alfalfa, baby lettuce, onions, permanent nursery crops for a while. So I have a little bit of experience with what happens in the Shandon sub area, which is separate from the San Juan sub area. Other sub areas, we still have about half of the Bradley sub area, have about half of the South Gavilan, also Estrella, Creston, and there may be one other. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Since this is the time we talk about things that aren't on the agenda, this is the time for me to talk.
Would you
And
mind giving your name just for the record, sir?
sorry,
Would you mind giving your name for the record?
Cody Ferguson, Paso Robles. What you have in your hand that I passed out to each of you is a reprint from the Wine Business Journal, which is, they applaud themselves as the homepage for the wine industry. This is from the Allied Grape Growers Association Symposium and Annual Meeting from a couple of years ago. The reprint tells you in short terms that there's about 30,000 acres of grapes that are overplanted. So it gets down to the point of who's going to take their grapes out. Because that's what the industry is advocating, and here it is right here. These are tests that they've done, and they can show that there's about 30,000 acres of production, irrigated production, going to waste annually. It's either dropped by picking at night with a machine and not using a gondola behind the machine, and then of course turning the grapes under into the soil. So that's going on, and it's going on with regularity. It was going on 2 years ago when this report was written, and they discussed it at the symposium for the Allied Grape Growers Association, which is an industry organization. It certainly isn't my organization or a water industry organization. It's a wine industry organization. And they have calculated accurately that there's 30,000 acres of grapes. That's conservatively, of course, being irrigated every year and then dropped. Why is that? You're not making any product out of it. All you're doing is raising fruit to be pummeled on the ground and go on to the next year's crop, and hopefully you'll sell that. We all know that if the sugar content doesn't meet the stick, you're not going to sell your grapes. Simple as that. So the bottom line here is somebody needs to take a look at this paper and decide who's going to take out their grapes and quit overpumping. Because we know for a fact now that the industry is overpumping, and they need to stop doing that because they don't have priority rights over the basin. The overliers do. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Graywall, Creston. I'm going to read to you the 5 elements of fraud. A false statement of material fact. Knowledge that the statement is untrue. Intent to deceive the people you're telling it to. The reliance by those people to count on that statement. And the injury to those victims. When a person has a duty to speak and silence may be treated as a false statement, this can arise if a party who has knowledge of a fact fails to disclose it to another party. This is what's been going on here. We talk about supplemental water. Oh, we need supplemental water. The last 6 years of annual reports show that, and I'm going to approximate, Paso Robles had access to 39,000 acre feet of Nacimiento water. They used 7,000 feet of that. So they wasted 32,000 feet. They could have been used instead of pumping from the basin, but they didn't because it wasn't beneficial for them in their pocketbook. So that's why I wonder why other people would want to buy it if it's not beneficial for them. At the same time, the county had 600 acre feet of state water and used 140. They wasted 460 acre feet of water. It's amazing to me when people say that they want to be involved and they've been doing so much. I have 6 letters here that were written to Jared Blumfield, Secretary of Environmental Protection Agency, Wade Crowfoot, Secretary for Resources, Karen Ross, Secretary of the California Department of Food and Agriculture. These 6 letters all state how these people feel that they've not had any input into the process. These letters were all written in 2019 and 2018. The people that wrote them got themselves on RAC, Water Resources Advisory Committee. They've been on all kinds of committees and signed up at meetings for the last almost 20 years. Yet they currently over and over and over again mislead the public with what they weren't able to do or what they didn't get to do when they were right there. Acting as a squeaky wheel, taking over every agency with as many seats as they can. So their voice is the only one that's heard. If you look at how many people are on the raft, there's 34. Well, let's see, they all belong to the Farm Bureau. They all belong to the wine growers. They all belong to every group where all the same people are on all those same groups. And then you want the people to follow the water code and the rules, and you're not doing it. This is unacceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Graywall. Any other public comment on items not on the agenda?
Candy Natural Templeton. I'm thankful for the grand jury report, number one, but under findings, you look at F6, 7, and 8, and it talks about the things that the board hasn't done and the PBC hasn't done. When are the things going to get done? When are the public going to get more information out? When are we going to stop some of the heavy pumping? For a fact, I have 3 dry wells, as most of you have already heard. 3 dry wells, less than a mile from me. I have Jerry Lohr and Stuart Resnick, Justin Winery. I have 3 dry wells, and it all started in 2013, 2014, when the county had the right to find out what was going on with all their deep wells. And no restrictions were ever made. Nothing was concerned about the wells that the ag people that bought their land. I understand they have the right to water, but no concern was given for the residents that they may drain the wells. I don't feel, in my heart, I do not feel that I had representation. And on this board, I have nobody representing me besides the county. And the county hasn't done a very good job so far. I'm appalled that Blaine, I'm thankful for him, but he's only been on the books for what, 2 years now? Why? We need more representation and we need things done quicker. I'm on the TAC committee and I appreciate being on there and I want to get things done, but I want to see some solution. I cannot handle looking at out my window, out on my front porch, looking at nothing but green vineyards when my land is completely brown with dirt. 100 rose bushes gone, all my greenery gone. And I'm buying water at $350 a month for 4,000 gallons. If grapes use 325,000 gallons in a year for an acre foot, you divide my 4,000 gallons into that, it gives you 81. 81 divided by 12 gives me 6 years and 9 months worth of water that I could be using for 1 acre of grapes for a year. Now that to me is appalling. That's heartfelt. That's me doing without. I'm 73 years old, I'm a widow and I don't need this. And I'm not finding any help. The state water board says that we have water available, hauled water and bottled water. You call the numbers on the list, we don't have it. They tell me they don't have anybody to haul water here. How many water trucks does the county own? Some solution has to be given to the people that are in need of help. Not everybody can afford $80,000 for a new well. I'm one of those. Take into consideration into this grand jury report. There's so many pages on here that reflect just my feelings alone. Please take heart and get something done with it. And Mr. Gibson, Murray Powell and I did come down and discuss the equity with you. Equity is not right. First one gets residential water.
Thank you. Any other public comment on items not on the agenda? Any online, Mr. Blakesley?
Sorry, I gave a little technical difficulties, just bear with. There we go. I've not seen any comments online.
Okay, well, with that, we'll close public comment on this item and move on to the next item, item 7, responses to any previous public comments.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Item 8, Mr. Reilly.
Thank you. Committee members, I want to give you a brief update on our GSP and our approval status. On March 2nd, which I think you're aware of, on March 2nd, 2023, we received a letter indicating that the DWR was planning at the time to approve our GSP as submitted. It was submitted last year as submitted, but we should, at the time, they indicated we should expect in the letter, ultimate official letter of approval, recommended corrective actions that need to be considered when the GSP is updated next. On June 20th, we actually did receive the final approval determination from DWR on our Paso Robles groundwater sustainability plan. So it has been officially approved now by DWR, but in that letter, there were a number of items that they identified that they would like us to consider addressing as corrective actions in a future groundwater sustainability plan update. So those, just a real quick summary of their recommended corrective actions. They wanted us to elaborate on the definition of undesirable results. And as you recall, undesirable results deal with a number of different things as identified by SIGMA, including loss of groundwater storage, lowering of groundwater levels, subsidence, interconnected groundwater, surface water, and others. So they want us to elaborate on the definition of those in our GSP. They want us to reevaluate the well impact analysis and to fill related data gaps. And that well impact analysis is specifically directed at well impacts to rural residential drinking water wells or shallow domestic wells, as we've been referring to them in the past. They want us to consider mitigation strategies for those rural domestic wells. They want us to further explain the connections between the potential interconnected surface water, groundwater areas that we have tentatively identified, at least that may occur periodically. They want us to continue to fill our data gaps, collect additional monitoring data, et cetera. And specifically that to address the interconnected surface water areas, explain the monitoring network for interconnected surface water, and then refine our sustainability management criteria to include the alluvial aquifer. You may recall that we really only have one monitoring in our monitoring network, our GSP monitoring network. We only have currently one alluvial well that we monitor. And then they want us to reconcile our monitoring network module and the GSP monitoring network, which many of these things are currently underway. I think with that, with that, I'll take any questions.
Are we doing public comment first?
Yeah, let's do public comment first.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Yes, thank you. Greg Raywall, Creston. Yeah, we have 75 years of water that's been taken from our watershed to South County out of the Salinas River. We used to have steelhead, we used to have beavers. The river used to flow all the time. And raising the dam would, I guess, be nice. The question is, the live stream agreement has never been honored correctly, and there should be water in there, and that's where your interconnectivity, the largest part, to the groundwater. That's like me putting my number 15 foot on your carotid artery and hoping you can still breathe. If we're not going to allow the water to come up there and come into the basin, we're always going to be short, except when we get good rain flows like we did this last year. We've been waiting for over 10 years for some stormwater capture things that could have happened in between now and then, but it didn't. We had more meetings, more committees, but we didn't get anything done. We've been talking about monitoring forever, more monitoring. From 2005 in the prior agreement to 2009, the DWR was here, gave us $208,000. And we did AB 3030, which was a mini version of Sigma. And we didn't have any problems. We didn't have any problems until the emergency ordinance happened. And then we were told, don't worry, it's a 2-year timeout. Everything's gonna be fine and we'll decide what we're gonna do. Within 9 months, we were being sued for prescription. Prescription can only be proven if you claim there's overdraft. So no wonder we're in an overdraft, because you can't claim prescription if we're not in an overdraft. Funny thing was, we had a 14-day trial and they couldn't prove overdraft. So we're using the wrong report. The most current report is the 2018 by GSI, the same company that's done the last 6 annual reports that show that we have 92,000 acre feet of water that was approved by the court. And if you subtract the 16,500 from the Atascadero Basin, and even if you up it to 2,000 for the Monterey section, you still have 73,500. That's 12,500 more than what's being used. And then all of a sudden we don't have a problem. And then what happens? Oh, grant money dries up. And all the people that need grant money to do all their private industry stuff have to pony up their own money. Imagine that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Any online?
No.
Any comments or discussion from the board? Okay, thank you, Mr. Ely. Moving on to item 9.
Thank you, member. Committee members, just a quick update. So it's sort of the last item was good news. So this is the bad news item. We submitted on March 29th, the SLO County submitted a grant application on behalf of the Paso Basin and all of the GSAs for a round 2 Department of Conservation grant to develop and implement a multi-benefit land repurposing program. Our grant application provided for approximately $9 million to develop and implement what we're calling our Miller program. On June 12th, we were informed by the Department of Conservation that we were not successful and not selected for funding, but we are encouraged, if future funding is available in these programs, to reapply. Just a quick note, we did do a debrief with the Department of Conservation, try to understand, what our weaknesses and strengths were in our proposal. And effectively what they told us was the proposals that were awarded funding really were just further ahead than we are. They had projects that were defined, that were ready, basically shovel ready for implementation. Ours just wasn't. We were still in the planning stages of what our Miller program is going to look like. We're going to continue to move forward with that. And we can talk about that more here in a little bit, but we will be more prepared, I think, and more better position to be successful if there is a future round of funding in this program. I'll stop.
Yeah, Blaine, with regard to shovel ready, that means usually on our part spending some money. And do you have any idea what it's going to take to get some of these projects set and ready to go cost wise?
That's currently, we have the Miller Technical Advisory Committee that is stood up and working on that right now. I think we're making really good progress. And I would expect certainly that we will have a better idea of what those projects, those land repurposing projects are going to look like in the very near term. I mean, over the course of the next few months. And then once we determine, once the TAC determines what those projects should look like and what they are sort of conceptually, I think then we'll be in a position to move those along and get them closer to shovel ready. So over the next 12 months, I'm hoping to be in a much better position to apply for future grant funds.
I think as a board, we should definitely be willing to do that because again, it's essentially where I look at it, it's all of our tax dollars. And if we don't ask for some of it back, we're not going to get it. Somebody else will be spending our money. So I think that's important that this board determines that if there's something we can move forward with and get ready, that is something we need to talk about. So thank you.
Public comment on this item. Public comment.
looking for any public comment on this item.
Okay.
Number 9, the Department of Conservation grant. No. Okay, not seeing any.
Okay.
None online.
Any further discussion, committee? Okay, next item is item 10, Mr. Reilly.
I think I'm going to give a quick introduction and then I'm going to turn it over to Taylor just to walk through the next few slides. But this board has asked for a regular update on where we are in our round 1 GSP implementation grant. As you recall, we were awarded $7.6 million last year. We've been working on those, and the various GSAs have been working on different projects that were included in that spending plan. And those include some infrastructure projects, including the City of Paso Robles Recycle Water Project, San Miguel CSD's Recycle Water Project, and then other management actions, and then addressing data gap deficiencies. So I'm going to have Taylor just walk you through where we are really from a spending position and kind of give you an idea where we are.
Thanks, Blaine. As you can see on the screen, we've submitted, since our last PBCC meeting, we've submitted the 3rd invoice, 1 additional invoice. That invoice total is $4,154. And on the bottom calendar, you can see 3 invoices have been submitted. We're working on the 4th invoice. Again, invoice number 3, the total was fairly low. The activities for the 6 components have been fairly minimal to date. However, I would note that the activities are starting to pick up, and so we'll start seeing these funds being expended as we move forward. Moving on to each component, again, component 1 has not been changed. This is only invoice 3 was only for some minimal work under component number 4. So components 1, 2, and 3 remain the same from our last report in April. But again, as I noted, that both the city and San Miguel have been working on the recycle projects. And so again, we expect to see those costs applying for reimbursement for costs in this next quarter. 4, again, there was a little bump there to the $4,000. And again, components 4, 5, and 6, again, we'll start seeing costs increase as we work through some of the technical advisory committees that are working through these items and some of the meetings that have occurred since our last meeting. And that's all I have to report.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, any online?
No.
Okay. Any comments or discussions from the board? No. Okay, next item, item 11, Mr. Blakesley.
Thank you. So I have a brief report on the technical advisory committee meetings that I'm working on that I'm facilitating. And so there's 3 technical advisory committees currently. There's the expanded monitoring network, the blended irrigation water supply program, and the multi-benefit irrigated land repurposing program. One thing to note that's different from our last meeting is that these technical advisory committee meetings that we call TACs, they are Brown Act. They're now subject to the Brown Act, and so they are in-person meetings only. And we notice folks of these meetings via email to our stakeholder list and post the materials on the county website. So the first update on the expanded monitoring network TAC, again, this is a slide that you guys saw last time, so I won't go into detail on the purpose of the TAC. I'm going to go straight to the updates. I would point out that there have been 4 meetings that have happened since the last PBCC meeting, and the current work items for the expanded monitoring network. We are working on a recommended network of 100 existing wells to the current 23 RMS network, which again may be ultimately reduced. 8 alluvial new wells, recommendations for those sites, which are largely based off the existing Todd groundwater study, and 3 sites for up to 40 transducers or continuous monitoring devices. And really the strategy that the TAC is employing that we're working on right now is having a consultant, GEI, develop options for, GSI, work on developing options for 3 options for the 100 sites. So that when we select a field consultant to go out in the field and ask landowners if they're willing to be added to the network, they have 3 wells to choose from. So again, the thought here is that it would make the efficiency in field provide better efficiency, so they wouldn't have to come back to the TAC and say, okay, this well didn't work. You know, what's your next recommendation? So that's the effort right now. That those recommended network will be reviewed with the TAC once it's completed in the next couple of weeks. And then once that's completed, we will be presenting a recommendation to the PBCC. And I will stop there and ask if there's any. Oh, sorry, let me go to the schedule real quick. This is largely unchanged, and our project target duration, you can see on the screen, is April of next year of 2024. And staff feels like we're still in a good place to meet that deadline. And I'll pause there and see if there's any updates that any TAC members would like to provide.
Thank you. Greg Graywell, I'm on the monitoring committee. I recommended the very first meeting that we should already have bought 50 of the transducers of the 100 that we're going to put in. They should be sitting on the shelf ready to go. They're not here. They said, well, we need to come to the bigger committee to get them. The money's been set aside. We should already have them in all the fire stations, county and city facilities where we don't need any more permission. And that information should have already been coming in, but it's not. So it's not our committee's fault. It's that we have to come back. You put together a committee, they should have a certain amount of leeway to get this job done. There was already identified 40 wells that we could have dropped in that are empty, that are good to go also, that we have photos of. So if we can get permission, we could be well on the way of half of those without any problem. We had an opportunity, but for whatever reason, it was denied to have outreach at the fair, a free place to put out literature for people that would volunteer their wells. But that didn't happen either. Thank you.
Any other TAC member updates? We're looking for TAC members right now, Cody. Thanks.
Robert Powell, Templeton resident, member of the monitoring TAC subcommittee. I was real excited to get put on that committee because I'm very interested in the domestic well problems, and the monitoring is obviously a step in the right direction to try to figure out how to resolve it. And the committee started out great. Everybody on the committee agreed to meeting every 2 weeks. And I noticed on your slide back, you had some dates on that meeting. And for some reason, unknown to me, we had a June 1st meeting, I believe, on that slide before this one. Maybe one more back, I can't remember now. Yeah, so we had a June 1st meeting, and then all of a sudden, the 2-week meetings were canceled. And I never have gotten an explanation of that. And like Mr. Graywell said, we were moving along. We had, the idea was to reach out to the community. We had a way of doing it during this fair, which would have been a great no-cost option for reaching out. And it all came to a dead stop. And then we did have a meeting a week or so ago. I guess that's a July 13th date. And then there was 2 hours of chit-chatting about, stream gauges and this and that and the other. But there's no priority set up really for this for this monitoring subcommittee. So we should be reaching out. Number one, we were supposed to get a legal agreement to be able to have property owners sign up for going onto their properties and them allowing us to monitor on their properties. And all of that's come to a stop. And I don't understand why. I don't understand what's happened in the last month and a half, why where we were moving right along, everybody was in sync, and then it all came to a halt. And one other thing I wanted to mention, and that is this quarterly scheduling of the main committee. I think there's questions on the subcommittees as to whether we need certain approvals from the main committee for various items. And if we're only having a quarterly regular committee meeting like today, I think that everything's going to be slowed down in terms of moving this project along. So I think I'd like you guys to consider scheduling these main committee meetings on a monthly basis. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take all the tax and then open it up for public comment if you're okay with that, Chair.
Yes, please.
Okay. The next TAC that's being facilitated is the blended irrigation water supply. And here, again, we've had 4 meetings since our last PBCC meeting. The current work item is really, and the main deliverable for this group primary was to finalize an RFP for the blended supply project. This is a grant-funded item, and the TAC was instrumental in developing project considerations that went into the development of the scope of work, which again, we culminated in an RFP that's on the agenda later in the meeting. So that's been completed. Future work items for the blended supply TAC include review of the RFP proposals that come in, provided that the PBCC approves an RFP, and then assistance in the selection process, and finally interfacing with the selected consultant as needed. You can see the meetings that we've held, the RFP that's been finalized, and on the project schedule, you can see that developing the RFP has been the work done to date. And then the 6 months from today is the feasibility and engineering study. In the RFP that's in your packet for later in the agenda item, it's contemplated to last for a 6-month term. One thing I would note is that the blended supply RFP is looking at right now principally the feasibility of the blended supply project, and is not dealing with the turnout, which was one of the original items, but that's not in the current RFP. And I'll go ahead, Glenn.
And Taylor, I just want to point out on that blue bar there, one of the things that's not really accounted for in that schedule is from the time the RFP gets published or advertised to the time that the proposals come in, reviewed, and time to award a contract. That's not shown. So just to let you know, that blue bar, that 6-month period to do this study is going to push to the right, probably a couple of months.
Yeah, good catch, Glenn. Now I'll pause here to see if there's any updates from the TAC members. Anyone on the blended TAC? Would you like to provide any feedback or comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I'll move on to the last TAC, which is the Miller, the Multi-Benefit Irrigated Land Repurposing Program. We've had 2 meetings since our last PBCC meeting, and the current work items for this group, we had discussions on funding requirements, and also looking at successful funding models for existing Miller programs that are out there in the state. Also looking at the Department of Conservation awarded entities. We are also been reviewing a price and concept interactive pricing model. And then lastly, and then on your agenda later in this meeting is a recommendation for the PBCC to consider a rate study. Again, the schedule is the same as last time. And I'll pause there and see if there's any update from any of the TAC members. Okay, not seeing any. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Let's open this up for public comment on this item 11, the report on activity from the technical advisory committees.
Cody Ferguson, Paso Robles. This item interests me a lot because right now, in my view, the bad boy in all this is the city of Paso Robles. They are currently exercising the most violations of the Groundwater Sustainability Act. Let me give you an example of that. They got 3 golf courses in this town. They each have 2 ag wells on them minimum. That's all I could count. 2 ag wells on 3 golf courses, and they're not monitored. They need to be. And it should come under whatever the city's taking out of the groundwater, because they're getting it free without having to pay a price of accommodation. As for the blended water, I've been hearing blended water forever. I thought at the time I heard it, it was really a good idea. I heard it clear back when they were building the La Quinta Hotel. That's been there for a number of years, as most of you know. I asked at that time, because the city was high on blended water at that point, are you going to install purple pipe or require them to install purple pipe at the La Quinta Hotel? I went to the city hall right here to ask. No. And they haven't required any hotel since then to put in purple pipe. They could have easily done that with a shift in the building code for the city of Paso Robles. They did not. So hence we have no system of works for all this wonderful blended water that you're going to make somewhere and deliver somewhere, but nobody knows where. Maybe the golf course should be a good place to start. And then as for fallowing, I went over some of that. Some of it's going to be grapes. Maybe some of it should be golf courses. But right now, there's people, the city of Paso Robles is violating the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act on a daily basis. They're not cleaning their water. They're building 502 new homes, which is the first installment on 1,500 new homes. So if you're gonna do something, the time to do it is when you're making the development, not afterwards, to require them to tear everything up and put stuff in. So you can be serious all day long about this blended water business, but this city has not taken that seriously, not even. And yet that's what we're pursuing instead of enlarging the treatment plant for Nacimiento water and allowing thousands of dollars worth of water to go down the pipeline and into the ocean. That's not good management practices.
Thank you.
Greg Graywell, Crescent. Now I want to speak to the blended water supply. I had downloaded a study that was done in 2003 from 2000 in the city of Paso Robles. This is how long they've been talking about blending water. This is before the Nacimiento project. They were wondering, should they build a treated plant at the dam or build a treatment plant in their town? Were they going to mix the water with the wastewater? Were they going to mix it with well water? What were they going to do? And again, like we mentioned in the very beginning, to be a water district with no boundary, with 2 miles apart, you're supposed to have a system of works. Yet we're going to ask somebody else to build this system of works because they have no way to get the water anywhere. They could be using Nacimiento water right now without blending it, instead of sending it to the ocean. All that water is being exported. So you take all the water, it's not blended right now, and you run it regardless where it comes from through all the homes in this town. And it goes to the treatment plant and it gets partially treated. They dump it in the river and it gets exported. Where all the people out in the unincorporated area use their water from their well, goes through their house, goes in their septic system and is returned back to groundwater. None of it is exported. And I agree. We're always looking at the farmers and the rural area to do anything to cut back water use. Yet there's a 55-page document with 5,000 rooms, 13 hotels, 6 hotels by the apartment, industrial complexes, all kinds of other things that's being done in this city. And right now, over the last year, because you can look at the annual reports, the city is in violation of a court order that was signed June 7th, 2019 on how much water they could take from this basin. And they're in violation by over 1,000 acre feet, minimum, not counting the golf courses. If they use 800 a piece, that's another 2,400. That's not the responsibility of the people that live in the rural area. And in the report, when you look at it, they mix They call golf courses public water systems. And they mix it with the rural residents' use. Why isn't it mixed with the city's use if they're in the city limits? They're not rural residents. I've got nothing against golf, but if you're gonna tell somebody that grows alfalfa, it's 5 acre-feet per acre. I'm sure they're using way more than that on the grass out in these areas while people living across the street can't do anything. There was 2 deep wells that were put in, 850 feet deep, 1,000 gallons a minute at the Links Golf Course, and across the street, there's 500 people that had shallow wells. It's not hard to figure out the 3 main areas with a shallow well problem that had to be changed. The cities in the red area and all the other things around them are the irrigated ag.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm George Tracy, and I noticed the technical committee is looking for volunteers to monitor wells. I'd be glad to have you monitor my well anytime. It's 650 feet deep. It was installed in 1987. It has roughly the elevation of the water is right now probably 320 feet down. I checked it in January, and that's when it was 320, so plus or minus a couple of feet. It's in Independence Ranch. Independence Ranch has 125 individuals with wells. Some of them are short, some of them are 200-300 feet. Thankfully, mine is 650 feet, and my pump is 520 feet down the hole. There are others that have had to drill a new well because they're wells that were installed probably 40 years ago now in some cases, just aren't deep enough. And it's a continual problem. So I'm more than willing to have you look at my well. I will be more than happy to join the technical committee. My background is in water, and therefore I would be happy to join you if you want me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on item 11? Any online?
No.
Okay. Any comments, questions, discussions from the board?
Yeah, Matt.
Kev,
Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
So I have a question regarding the monitoring TAC. And I apologize, I haven't been following along with it as much as I probably should have been. But do we have devices that we've settled on for monitoring?
No, not at this point. The first priority is to identify those wells, existing wells within the basin that would be most appropriate for monitoring. So we're looking for wells, first of all, that would be representative of those areas where we have concentrations of rural domestic wells, areas where we've seen some of our monitoring network wells, GSP monitoring network wells, either declining rapidly or we actually have one that has gone dry. And then other specific areas where areas of potential interconnected surface water, groundwater, things like that. That's the first priority. Figure out where those wells are that we'd like to monitor, establish the condition of those wells, identify a subset of those wells that then could be instrumented and equipped with telemetry. And then once that's done and we know which of those wells, where those wells are, what the condition of those wells are, how deep those wells are, then we would put together the specifications for the telemetry and instrumentation.
Okay, so I think previous discussions with you, Blaine, we are looking at a generalized type of device. We're not looking to have multiple types of devices.
Yeah, our preference is that we would have a uniform instrumentation specification across the basin. That way, the maintenance of and spare parts and all those different issues with that kind of a network, it's just made simpler. That's our goal. Yes.
And I apologize if it was listed earlier, but how long or what is the time frame to get to that point essentially?
Well, I think we're really close to developing that recommended network. And I think as was described earlier, the TAC has been asked to identify a network of kind of priority A wells. So if there's 100 wells out there that are in the areas that we would like them to be, identify those wells and then identify a backup to each of those wells so that when we go out and try to secure a right of access and agreement that would include a data share agreement. We're anticipating that some of those wells that are that priority A on that tier A list, we won't be successful in securing that agreement for whatever reason. So that there will be a tier B well that'll be associated with that. We would go to that one owner next, and then a tier C. So a first pick, second pick, and backup for each well. That's what they're working on right now. We anticipate that to be ready to go in the next, probably within the next 4 weeks.
So theoretically, by September, that could be brought back to this board
That's
as a
our
recommendation.
Yeah, that's our plan.
And
Yes.
then theoretically, by the end of the year, there could be some sort of recommendation on purchasing devices under this grant to move forward.
Yeah, and I would point out the reason, that it's hard to go buy all the equipment up front because most of the transducers themselves, are just one piece of the system that is used to measure water levels. The other is the cable, and depending on what kind of transducer we ultimately select, the cable is the other component of it. In fact, the largest cost, as you well know, Kelly, is the cable. So we need to know which wells we're going to put them in first so that we can then specify for each well the transducer and the cable length. So that's why we can't go do it right now.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, man, yeah, Blaine, I had similar kind of things from what testimony we heard, with regard to these tax that we have, people spending time to bring their input in there and we're not taking any advice, or at least didn't seem like it were. I mean, if we're open for business to monitor wells and we have nothing to monitor with, we're not really open for business. That's the way I'm looking at it. And if we need to get that established, like you just said, and understand what kind of depths we need, I'd be ordering all kinds of parts that we can adjust, as needed. We're going to be doing a lot of them, right? So I would think, and it's going to be time, obviously, once you place the order before you even get it, it's just it could extend out. So to me, I thought we were already on that point, and that we need to get on it if we're not at this point. I think it's really, from what I'm hearing, it's not. Doesn't seem like we're moving very fast. So
I guess I would, politely disagree in that I think we are making some very good progress over a relatively short amount of time. I think you're going to see that progress accelerate now that we have really a attack that's in place and has marching orders. I realize that there are some frustrations. Some folks would like to see things go faster, but it has to be well thought out. And it has to be a program that's well thought out and put together in a way that when we finally pull the trigger and implement it, it's going to be something that works and achieves the goals that we're trying to achieve. So I realize there's some frustration. I think we're going to catch up pretty quickly here. We know what we need to do. For instance, in the wells that were identified for, or some of the wells that were identified for transducer installation, we know very little about the actual well, the construction of the well, the details of the well. There's a program that DWR has that they will come out and video those create a video of those wells to help us better understand what that well condition is, where that transducer needs to be set. We've made application to DWR to come out and do that, and we've identified those wells. That's in the queue right now. So, I mean, we're making progress. I realize that it's frustrating that maybe to some folks that we're not moving fast enough, but I think you'll see some results in the very near future.
yeah, and I agree. I didn't think you're just sitting on your hands, but on the other hand, we only meet, like you said, quarterly, And the TAC is going to give recommendations, and it could be a way that we can move things faster and quicker. And even in reports like today, I didn't really see any of the recommendations that I'm sure was spoken to at those meetings, but we didn't hear it as a board.
No,
It's coming
understood.
only to staff at this point. So,
And I think we can do a better job of getting that information to you in a timely manner.
okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, and we can contemplate giving more specific guidance to these TACs that are, preparing recommendations for us that, we'd like specific feedback on certain topics and at certain meetings. And we can certainly add more meetings to our
Yeah, if needed.
calendar too, as needed. I mean, I think.
Well, I was going to say, as a group, they must have a chair, and then, as a collective group, they want these things to be brought forward to this board, and that should be brought up in a staff report somehow.
Yeah.
So it's more visible and not just at the staff level.
Okay. Moving on to the next item 12, Mr. Reilly.
Again, a quick update, and this is really a clarification from on an issue that I think a lot of us misunderstood. For a very long time, it was always our understanding that we were under Sigma, we were obligated to update our groundwater sustainability plan every 5 years, and that update would be due January 2025. We were at a Sigma symposium a few weeks ago, and DWR made a presentation and clarified that it isn't a requirement of Sigma to update our GSP every 5 years, but we are obligated to evaluate our GSP every 5 years and perform an evaluation, and then report the results of that evaluation to DWR at that time. So we do have a January 2025 deadline to complete that evaluation coming up, in a little over a year. The DWR is working on and plans to produce or release guidelines for doing that evaluation over the next couple of months. And we're waiting on that to kind of to make sure we understand exactly what they're looking for. And then we'll come back to you with recommendations for what that evaluation may entail and what that timeframe may look like. So I just wanted to make that clarification because it was something that I think most of the GSA staff didn't really understand.
Yeah. That's what I thought we were going to be doing every 5 years. Apparently not so deep.
Any public comment on this item? No. Thank you, Blaine. Okay. Next item 13, approval of minutes from our April 26th meeting. Any public comment on this item?
The minutes themselves.
Yeah, there's an item 7 in the minutes.
You give it that chair?
Sure.
Give me 1 second. There with the battery. Yeah.
It's on page 70 of the. It's on page 70 of 145.
Okay, right here.
There you go. If you can scroll that up a little more. Number 7.
Yeah.
Oh,
Number 7.
oh, yeah.
There.
Okay. So this is famous Mr. Gibson's equity statement, which you laid on us in March, at our March meeting right at the end without any prior notice. And then in the April meeting, which these minutes are part of, he brought out a new version that wasn't disclosed as part of the agenda items. It was handed out at the meeting. In any event, if you look at, let's see here, where is it? Gibson explains his vision for the statement of equity and would endorse a statement that would be agreeable to all GSAs and include the statement of equity in the updated GSP. He notes he believes the statement of equity, I think it is getting close to final version and has not heard any major opposition to the concept. Well, there was a lot of major opposition to the comment. And below this, you don't have to scroll down. There was 5 or 6 public comments without any description of what those comments were, that mostly were objecting to the term equity. In any event, it says here, and correctly, that possibly by the next PBCC meeting, each GSA could possibly endorse a statement of an expected update to the GSP and so on. So what happened on April 26th? This was an agenda item that was not an action item. It was only for a discussion. It was supposed to be 5 minutes. It went on for 30 minutes. There was no motion ever due on this subject. There was no vote by the board on this subject. And what did Mr. Gibson do? Well, he went down to the Board of Supervisors that he's now controlling on June 6th. And there's an agenda item 24 there, and I'm going to read it to you. It says, acting as a Basin County of San Luis groundwater GSA. 1, receive and file the Paso Basin Cooperative Committee proposed statement of equity statement. And 2, endorse and direct the Director of Groundwater Sustainability or designee to incorporate the principles stated herein. So Mr. Gibson misled the Board of Supervisors. He submitted his equity statement, and in this agenda indicates that you guys approved it. It wasn't approved. It wasn't close to being approved. So I'm wondering why we have a board member sitting here who is so dishonest and intentionally misrepresenting what the board has done and not done at the Board of Supervisors and put this agenda item through on a 3-2 approval vote.
Thank you.
What are you guys going to do about that?
Thank you. Greg Graywell, Creston. There were some other documents that were put. First off, the audio minutes don't match the written minutes. That's the first problem. So the written minutes just came out here this last week. So we've been waiting for, I don't know, over a month. The stuff that was done on June 6th of the Board of Supervisors didn't match the audio minutes that came out on the video that you could go to watch what happened. And I took notes of what was said and what was done by every member and by the public speakers. And that was what was not represented, like Murray just said. That was not represented. And there was other documents that were not added to that, like the document from the Creston Advisory Body that covers about 40,000 acres of the people that live over the basin that were against this. There are so many other things that could have been done with this. There's a big difference between equity and equality. There's a thing in this state called the correlative right doctrine. That's what gives you equal right to the beneficial use of water on your property, not equity of the use of your right, the equality of the use of that right. And so I would hope that you don't approve these statements until, or these minutes, until the minutes reflect what is in the audio. And obviously, I gave copies to this board. I gave copies to pretty much every board, because I filed a Brown Act violation because of the June 6th board meeting where this took place. That what was said at that meeting didn't match the minutes on the audio that was from this meeting. So I don't think it's that hard to follow what is supposed to be done. We're all here to get a job done and to do a right thing. And this year alone, I've filed 6 Brown Act violations against Supervisor Gibson at the Board of Supervisors because of things that were done. I'm still waiting for answers from county council on a few of them, and the district attorney agreed with me on a few of them. So I take it really to heart that there's no representation over the basin by a supervisor for the districts that the people live over. They elected certain people to represent them in their districts, and that's not happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on item 13? Any online?
No.
Mr. Gibson.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I would remind my colleagues on the committee that the action before us is to approve the minutes. And as is typical, and I will confirm this with council later, but typically in meetings where audio and or video is recorded, the official record of the meeting is the audio and or video recording. These are action minutes, which are a summary, a convenient guide to their to what has transpired in a written form that's easy to access. And in reviewing the minutes before me, they adequately capture the actual actions of the day of that meeting. And so I would be pleased to move approval of these minutes.
I have a motion to approve. Any further discussion or a second?
Guess I just have a clarifying question. And if I may, ask Mr. Graywall, you are referring to the video of this meeting. The PBCC meeting does not match the minutes provided for number 7.
Correct. Minutes from April 26th do not coincide with minutes that were used in. It took minutes from the April 26th meeting, used them at the POS meeting. They were incorrect. Now we're using incorrect minutes. If the video is the ultimate thing, I'd like to know how you carry this video around in your pocket. You want to talk about something in public comment where there's no video machine to show what happened during the meeting.
Okay, then my next question is, Mr. Reilly or Mr. Blakeslee, I'm assuming Mr. Blakeslee prepared the minutes.
I did with the assistance of my coworker.
Okay, and you
Josh
guys
Holmes.
reviewed the video from this meeting, not necessarily the one from the Board of Supervisors meeting, but from this meeting, and prepared these minutes?
Yeah, so the minutes are a combination of my notes that I take during these meetings, and then in spots, my coworker will listen back to the video audio to fill in any gaps.
And you feel they're consistent?
That was our understanding. If you want to ask some clarity of what was incorrect, that might be helpful for staff, unless you direct us to go back and do it. We typically don't do the minutes as a verbatim. You know, we
No,
capture
I
the
don't
general.
expect that.
Yeah.
Well, again, these are action minutes, and whatever action at the Board of Supervisors is relevant to the action before this committee today.
Correct, yes. Yeah, I don't see anything in these minutes that I think is incorrect or inaccurate. There may be gaps that are missing that are in the audio, which if that's the controlling version, that's great. That's available for our reference.
Well,
Comment, yeah.
my,
I'm sorry, but
Allow.
Those
Okay.
minutes should reflect
So we-
absolutely, there was no motion, there was no vote of approval, but equity.
Well, and that, yeah, then the minutes don't reflect that there was any vote or approval. So they don't, so. Thank you.
I think the understanding here is that the meeting minutes from our meeting indicate that the GSAs will review it separately. What transpired at the Board of Supervisors after this meeting is irrelevant to this meeting.
That's right. And we don't need to represent how these minutes were used at any other meeting.
No.
Do these minutes materially reflect what we think transpired here on the 26th of April? But we have a motion to approve. And
I'll second, so long as the audio and video is available for public review, which I imagine it is. So I'll second.
Discussion.
yes,
Yeah, if there's been a public comment about that not being accurate, again, it's not going to hurt anything to postpone this vote till the next meeting anyway and have staff review it one more time. There's no reason why we can't do that. It's not pertinent at this point that we record the minutes, but if there is something that we missed staff wise.
I just want a clarification. I don't think that anyone is suggesting that these minutes for this meeting
Want to make
do
clear
not match the video. Is that correct? You're not suggesting that these minutes do not match the video or the audio. Is that correct? You're suggesting that somehow the Board of Supervisors minutes are.
The minutes that were used in the Board of Supervisors were claimed to be from the meeting here. They are not what was represented here. Not a video. The video of slides with no audio. The audio of what people say, and what was said at the other meeting, not what happened.
okay.
So we have two different areas, we have two different groups using the same minutes that are incorrect.
Okay.
So I don't need every single word written down, but if it says that a recommendation, and the other thing was, it wasn't an action item. It was a report item that was supposed to take 5 minutes, and the report item turned into a 30-minute. And then when we get to the next meeting, all of a sudden it's an action item, and they're voting on something that somebody took action on that didn't happen.
Okay, so we Mr. Hammond, if it's your recommendation that we ask staff to review the minutes again, compare them to the audio and bring them back at our next
Yep.
meeting.
In the interest of clarity, I think that's important at this
Okay,
point.
I would,
I'm amenable to that and I'll withdraw the motion. I don't see.
okay, so
From staff, just to make sure I'm clear, are you asking for to look through the whole set of minutes or just specific to section 7?
Section 7.
And are you looking to make the minutes more verbatim or just to check the general
If it's
feel
more-
and tone?
I would say if it clears us up, definitely do it that way.
Well,
Okay.
I would suggest, so that we don't micromanage staff on this, we have a set of minutes that are proposed. We'd
Right.
like staff to review them against the recording of this
The
meeting
actual recording.
and see if there are any changes that need to be made to create an accurate set of action minutes. And again, that's not a verbatim transcription of our
And if
discussion.
staff can actually put a link on their report that anybody can click on and go right to that point in
and
time.
they have a timestamp there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
exactly what would
it
be
exists.
helpful
I mean,
for public.
in the draft before us, Mr. Hammond, the link, the timestamp exists.
Yeah.
So
I agree
there.
on that.
We'll take another look at section 7.
okay. So moving on to item 14, will you introduce this item, Mr. Reilly?
Yes, thank you. So I think it's been discussed a number of times today. Included in your packet is the final report of the grand jury investigation on the Paso Basin. It's a pretty comprehensive report. At the end of the report, there is a request from the grand jury that the PBCC respond to, first of all, the findings. There's a number of findings in the report. And then a number of the recommendations in the report, they've asked the PBCC to respond to. I reached out to county council to make sure I was clear on how best to recommend that this be done. And the recommendation is that because the grand jury specifically requested the responses to the findings and the recommendations from the PBCC, so this body, that we ask you to collectively make those responses today. We've set aside an hour. We realize it's a little unusual request from a board like this, but we felt like this is probably the best way to get it done. So that's our request to you guys.
Do you have the report up so people can see it somehow?
Sure we can.
Because I've got it on mine, but I think everybody else should be able to see it too.
Yes, and we can bring the full report up if you'd like, or we also have the actual full report.
Yeah.
And of course, it was in the packet and available online and emailed to the entire list. Okay, so I think the protocol here, we're gonna start by taking public comment on this item and then bring it back for discussion and hopefully sufficiently as possible prepare a response to the grand jury. Okay. So Mr. Blakesley, let's open public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment? Not seeing any in the audience or online.
Okay. Then we'll close public comment and bring this back to the board. So there is a form. So can we scroll down and maybe briefly review
Items
the
R4 through R5? Yeah.
Yeah, 1 through 5 and 9, I believe, are the items that the grand jury specifically tasked this body with responding to. There's a lot of material in this report. I think there's a lot of very well-crafted material.
Paste.
And then there's also a form response that they recommend we use, and I think that's fairly straightforward.
Could I clarify with Mr. Ely? In responding to the grand jury, and the form indicates that the grand jury, in addition to the responses, would like responses to the findings, which is the factual statement. So this body is tasked with responding to the findings.
That's correct. All of the findings and then the specific recommendations that they are identified for this body.
Okay. So
should we start with the findings?
that's the factual basis and sort of sets the context of where we are. So
okay,
we can rip through them here, see if we can. I mean, these are questions of fact. I know we've been discussing it to an extent at the county, and I could give you some of the background if it's all right with Mr. Reilly. I'll give you some of the background of the of how we are responding, how we're thinking about responding.
Yes, please.
So on finding 1, combination of drought conditions and increased agricultural lands and production has resulted in an unsustainable decline in the Paso Basin. And our proposal is we agree with this finding straight up. And if, maybe we can straw vote this as a matter of efficiency. Is there any objection to that as a?
What we've done just to kind of hopefully make it a little bit more efficient is we've created just a Word document that will allow you, we can go one by one to, and we're going to live edit for you guys. So
okay,
when it's done, it's done.
Well, let's discuss these just one at a time, and some of these will be very easy, I think, to just tick through. So the county is prepared to
we
accept that finding.
We agree with this finding,
as does the Shannon San Juan Water District.
Yep. So again, I would ask if maybe we can voice objections to it, make sure we can move this.
Yeah, that's probably even better. So
to do.
So any objections or discussion of finding number 2?
Sorry, did you all agree to finding number 1?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Number two, you can read it, that it's since 98, there've been over 7,000 acre feet reduction, 700,000 acre foot reduction in groundwater storage, resulting in dry wells for many rural residential properties and jeopardizing long-term agricultural viability. Again, the county agrees with this.
Yeah, and I mean, most of the data and statistics from the grand jury's report here are pulled from the GSP itself or from other studies. So I mean, you know, we could
Substantiates those.
right,
numbers,
we
yeah.
can quibble about whether the data is perfect, but I mean, substantially, we certainly agree with that finding. Any
Paso would
objection?
agree. Yeah.
Okay, we agree. Numbers 3.
Current number and location of groundwater monitoring well data collected by PBCC is insufficient for decision making. Again, county simply agrees with this.
Any objection to this finding? No. We certainly are making great efforts to improve groundwater monitoring, so which we
just
wouldn't be
spoke
doing
about
if we
it,
thought
yeah.
it was sufficient. So, any objections?
No.
Okay.
On number 4, the PBCC currently does not require or have full access to the annual volume of groundwater pumping by all agricultural users to determine the extent of demand at the basin. On this one, the county partially disagreed. Partially, how do we phrase it? We wholly or partially disagree with this finding for the following reasons. And we partially disagree with this finding. And there's a block of text that we've developed that points out that since 2014, the county's hydrologic consultants developed estimates of groundwater, of agricultural water demand using land use data along with climate and soil data that were analyzed and processed using the soil water balance model that was developed for the Paso Robles groundwater basin model update, which was GSSI in 2014. The text block goes on, and I don't know, Mr. Reilly, can we provide that text block, or should I try to read it into the record? How should we go back?
I think if you wouldn't mind, read it into the record, and then if the committee agrees with that, then we can certainly provide the text.
Okay. So let me go ahead and start again. If it's the pleasure of my colleagues, it's a longish paragraph, but only one. We partially disagree with this finding. Starting in 2014, the county's hydrogeologic consultants developed estimates of agricultural water demand using land use data along with climate and soil data, which were analyzed and processed using the soil water balance model that was developed for the Paso Robles groundwater basin model update, GSSI 2014. This methodology was used in the development of the GSP and subsequently for the preparation of GSP annual reports for water years 2019 through 2022. In the water year 2022 GSP annual report, our consultants also used satellite-based evapotranspiration, parentheses ET, close parentheses, data to estimate agricultural water demand. Based on a comparison of the two methods, our consultants determined that the satellite-based method is considered more accurate as it directly measures actual ET as it varies spatially and temporally throughout the subbasin and throughout the year, thereby capturing nuances in crop irrigation practices, such as deficit irrigation. Our intention going forward is to retire the soil water balance model method and use the satellite-based method exclusively for estimating groundwater extractions for irrigated agriculture. Although we anticipate making future refinements and improvements to this methodology for estimating ag groundwater pumping, we believe that the use of satellite-based ET data will provide a reliable and accurate methodology for estimating agricultural groundwater pumping at the Paso Robles groundwater basin. And so that is the partially disagree. It does not require or does not have full access to the amount of ag pumping. We indicate that we have done studies. That's the justification for that.
So perhaps for purposes of our board's response, we could draft a simpler and shorter response and say, you know, we partially disagree because significant work has been done to estimate the annual volume of groundwater pumping.
And 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 I think that's great. The question is timing. We have how many more days to respond? We have to file this.
September. It's nice.
So from the date of the letter, which was June 21st, we have 90 days. Do you happen to know the?
Yes, it's on the agenda. It's
I think it-
September 21st, I believe.
So I mean, I think the county's response is certainly comprehensive and accurate. And if we want to incorporate that as you read it into the record and actually approve this at a, special meeting at the end of August, which I think we may need anyway, I'd be supportive of that.
That's it.
So that maybe means that here we will be drafting and directing staff to complete a draft of our responses that will then be brought back to us in complete form for approval at a subsequent meeting.
That would be appropriate, I think, especially. I was going to ask our city staff, Christopher Alackle, a little bit. This is kind of outside of our way of the city, but what does staff think about this particular case? Does it need to have full access to annual groundwater? With regard to pumping and ag, we as a city, as a GSP or a GSA, don't really have anything to do with that at this point. What was your opinion?
I'm not sure I fully understand.
Well, what the finding here says is basically, does the committee here have full access to annual volume groundwater pumping and ag users? And so I am kind of thinking that we are relying on county data at this point.
Yeah, we don't have full access. As Bruce mentioned, we have these estimates that have been developed using various methods. And it's important to really understand what the agricultural pumping is. And in the absence of actual, metered well data, I think the satellite data that we're talking about here is the next best thing that we have available.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, it is true to say that, we partially disagree, obviously. But that, Bruce's statement certainly clarifies where we're going.
And I'm more than happy if we can turn it back to staff to simplify it. I'm good with that.
Kind of long and lengthy, but we got the point.
That's the way the county is. That's the way I am.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Okay. So is that the pleasure of my colleagues to turn it back to committee staff but in general to adopt the partial disagreement and some statement of explanation that captures what I read into the record.
Yes. Is that?
So I agree with that. I do have one question though. There's obviously going to be some of these that we don't agree, but the intention is that we're going to bring it back to a subsequent meeting for this board to formally approve before it goes back to the grand jury.
That's right. And I think we should agree on everything that we can and direct staff to draft or perfect any responses that are needed.
Or get a consensus here. Yeah, exactly. So
okay,
I would agree with that.
So finding 5, GSP initiatives for feasible supplemental water options and conservation measures are insufficient to balance the basin. Basin recovery depends upon reduction in active agricultural production pumping.
So if I could,
please.
I'll again read into the record a longish paragraph. We partially disagree with this finding, although we do agree that reductions in groundwater pumping will be required to achieve sustainable conditions in the Paso Basin. We believe that the projects and management actions identified in the GSP will be sufficient to balance the basin. Some projects and management described in the GSP are currently in the development and implementation phases. These projects that will bring supplemental water into the basin to be used in lieu of groundwater pumping. These include projects that will bring supplemental water into the basin to be used in lieu of groundwater pumping. Examples of these include the City of Paso Robles recycled water project, which is currently under construction, and the San Miguel CSD recycled water project, which is currently in the design phase. In addition, the PBCC has formed a technical advisory committee, or TAC, to provide recommendations for moving forward with the design of the blended water supply project, which will bring a blended supply of Nacimiento water and City of Paso Robles recycled water into the basin where it can be used for agricultural irrigation in lieu of groundwater pumping. Additionally, management actions, including the multi-benefit irrigated land repurposing, or MILR program, is currently under development with support from a TAC that was formed by the PBCC. The primary goal of the MILR program will be to achieve voluntary reductions in agricultural groundwater pumping.
I totally agree with all those statements. That's for sure.
And again, there's a desire to, I mean, might as well ask if there's any commentary to that, to ask staff to refine that for our final approval, but I'm quite comfortable with what's
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the general idea. I think the staff should refine it based on this committee as opposed to the county necessarily, but
yeah, and give you a printed version and the public a printed version soon enough to be able to see.
yes.
Yeah, so will staff be able to, staff from all GSA staff be able to meet and review these responses?
Yes, I'm sure we could find time.
So
Okay, I think that's a great
Okay.
draft response.
6.
The failure of the PBCC to apply equitable pumping restrictions has resulted in continued decline of the Paso Basin.
And again, the county would propose, we partially disagree with this finding. Although the continued level of groundwater pumping has contributed to the continued decline in groundwater levels in the Paso Basin, the effects of prolonged severe drought periods during the past several years has significantly reduced the volume of water being recharged to the basin. The lack of recharge during these drought years has also significantly contributed to the decline of groundwater levels in the basin.
With that.
And that's certainly true. We could also comment that, you know, the failure over many years to implement supply augmentation projects has also contributed as well. We could elaborate further, but I think that's factually accurate for sure.
So I agree with both of your guys' statements. That one thing that I think we probably should make clear is that this isn't a problem that started with the PBCC. There is a delay from taking action by the PBCC, but also by the agencies before the PBCC and everybody going back to the beginning of time. I don't think we have to go that far, but so as we refine this, I think that we need to sort of make that clear that it's not directly related to the formation or existence of this committee.
Agreed.
And staff has captured that.
Okay.
All right.
Finding 7, public information and outreach on Paso Basin status is inadequate.
So the county's proposed response would be, we partially disagree with this finding. There has been a significant effort to inform the public with regard to the status of the Paso Basin and the GSA's efforts and progress toward GSP implementation. The PBCC, which includes representatives of each of the GSAs in the Paso Basin, meets regularly under Brown Act protocols, providing access for public attendance and participation. In addition, each of the GSAs have periodic meetings that are open to public attendance and participation. Recently, the PBCC formed 3 TACs that meet regularly under Brown Act protocols, providing access for public attendance and participation. To supplement the various public meetings that occur, members of the GSAs regularly attend and participate in various stakeholder and industry group meetings to provide information, updates, and answer questions. Finally, members of the GSAs work closely with local media outlets to inform the public. Although these efforts have been productive, we do agree that the public information and outreach efforts within the Paso Basin should be expanded.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
That sounds, yeah, fine. I mean, people, you know, they want to know what they want to know, or if they don't want to know, they're not going to look into it. So, but just to state that we're not doing a good enough job is kind of probably.
Yeah, I mean, more is always better.
Yeah.
And, but real efforts are being made.
Okay. And I'll give you a spoiler alert here as we go to finding 8, 9, 10, and 11. The county agrees with these findings. So if you want to just read the findings that are recommendation, and we'll go ahead with that, and then I'll end with just one.
Okay. So finding 8, fees that would make the GSP self-sustaining are not uniformly applied across the GSAs. Unincorporated areas governed by the county are not collecting fees. I think that's simply true. Any opposition to that? Okay. Finding 9, rural residential wells remain at risk. Many rural residential users lack the resources and means to correct the situation. Any objections?
It's pretty broad, but
Yeah. Finding 10, there remains an inequity between rural properties and using groundwater for agricultural production under the 2013 county planting ordinance. How do you understand that?
Right. That's
Well, you know, the reality is that some who are interested in planting irrigated crops can't find a means of offsetting the necessary water use. That's a result of a decision made by the Board of Supervisors a while ago to disallow off-site offsets. And so that confines those offsets to individual. It's a considered opinion of the board based on a great amount of public comment that though it was necessary to keep that offset ordinance in place in order to prevent further damage to the basin. So the fact that it is in unequal between properties is a fact. Yeah. That's the reality.
I think it might be fair in this particular case that we agree, but I'll include a statement that the PBCC is not in control of that, but that was a county decision and a county ordinance.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay, I'm fine with that.
not good.
Okay. Finding 11, management efforts have not advanced sufficiently to begin regulation of basin activities.
Again, the county agrees.
Yeah, I think we're very close. Any objection to that finding?
And then if I could just add, I should have prefaced this. The reason we have these proposed responses to the findings is that the county, as I think you know, is going to be required to respond to certain of the recommendations.
Right.
So we have to go. It's not that, you know, we're doing this on, this is our take on the findings for our set of responses. But we thought it might be useful to at least start the conversation.
Yeah, and I think it certainly has been so far. Okay, so that's it for the findings. I think we've agreed or begun to draft responses for the partially disagreeing findings, and we'll look to staff to kind of refine and perfect those responses, staff from all 5 GSAs, and bring back a recommendation for us to approve at our next. Okay, so recommendations 1 through 5 and 9, we are specifically tasked with responding to. Recommendation 1, the GSAs need to expedite their plans to expand the monitoring network for use in the 2025 GSP update. Of course, we now know that it's not a GSP update so much as a GSP evaluation. But I think certainly our intention is the intention of all the GSAs, I believe, is to expedite these processes as quickly as possible. So I would propose that enough action has been taken to say this recommendation has been implemented.
Well, I'm kind of refer to staff, what would be the best response on something like that with what we already have going?
I think it's appropriate to say that the action has been implemented. We have expedited plans to implement the monitoring network.
Yeah, it is moving forward.
Yeah.
It is in
It's
the
top of the list.
exactly.
So we might ask staff to elaborate slightly on that in the proposal to come back, which references the creation of the TAC and the progress to date in a shorter paragraph, perhaps.
Yeah, and we have a working schedule that we can incorporate into that little narrative. Yeah.
Mr. Merrill, Mr. Dodds, any further clarification on that? Or is that acceptable?
No, I agree. It's appropriate.
Okay, recommendation 2. The GSAs need to employ the most accurate satellite data for determining groundwater utilization or adopt regulations which mandate reporting of groundwater extraction for agricultural production wells within the Paso Basin by the 2025 GSP update.
I think that was kind of answered actually in that previous one, but specifically we could maybe use Bruce's language with regard to that more modern satellite technology. So we are different.
So would it be fair to, I would check maybe either the second or the third box. And again, would defer to staff that the idea is, we have some text in the response to the finding that speaks to the transition to satellite data, and we expect it to happen. Is there more analysis, but recommendation, further, we haven't formally said that that's the only way we're going to do it, or we haven't really made that.
In the 2022 water year 2022 annual report, our most recent annual report, we did use satellite-based ET to develop the estimates of agricultural groundwater usage. So it has been implemented. I mean, we anticipate that methodology will be refined and improved in the future, but it's been implemented.
So we could check the first box.
Yeah.
And go on to say more
that we're implementing even further. All right. Yeah, as a better technology.
Yeah, I'm supportive of
I
that.
agree with that.
Recommendation 3. Implementation of the proposed Miller program to establish voluntary land fallowing needs to be initiated by the 2025 GSP update. If voluntary measures are ineffective, the PBCC will need to implement a mandatory program. I think it's certainly the intention of the GSAs to see this Miller program built out and implemented, initiated prior to 2025. It's certainly not in place today. So I think this is one likely where this recommendation has not yet been implemented, but will be implemented in the future. We can comment that we have a TAC working hard to bring recommendations on the final construction of that program back to this board for approval and recommendation to the GSAs.
Yeah, but they're also saying basically if it doesn't work, they want to make sure we're going to do mandatory programs. So to me, I don't know, that's kind of saying that you will do it but to me, we also are supposed to have projects to get us there. And the whole thing is a bunch of projects. And if this one doesn't work specifically, it doesn't mean that we have to do that one, but the offset is really what we're trying to get this.
So maybe the thing would be to direct staff with a comment at the bottom as to the matter of a mandatory cutback program that will require further analysis if it's necessary.
If necessary.
Well, and this isn't clear that it's a mandatory cutback program either. A mandatory program. I mean, if what we're working on right now isn't sufficient, we will have to do something else. I mean, that's simply true.
That's what the whole plan's about.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're comfortable with a statement to that effect?
Yeah.
It's hard to state that it will happen. We don't control everything to put it into place. I believe it will happen. I don't know how extensive it'll be, but pretty sure it'll, to some degree, it will happen. It's probably a safe statement, but it's not like we all vote and it's gonna happen in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think the intention to implement the program is what our response is.
Is this, are you guys talking about, box number 2?
That's right.
Okay.
So you captured that perhaps that'll have some additional color that, you know, this program is being developed. There's a TAC specifically on this project, you know, and it's understood that if this program's not successful, something else will need to be done. Yeah. Recommendation 4, the GSAs must establish and implement the necessary governance structure to build public trust and execute procedures up to and including formal regulations to define equitable groundwater extractions and enforcement mechanisms. Yeah, so I mean, I would propose that, and I know there's been a lot of discussion about this. I mean, this body governed by this MOU is a governance structure, and it is, we may decide that there are changes or different governance structures that are warranted or useful in the future, but it's not, I mean, we do have a governance structure and it is capable of implementing the GSP as these 5 GSAs continue to collaborate. So I'm not sure exactly what the best response is here. I agree, but I think we've largely already done it, at least for now.
And I take the main subject of the sentence is the GSA must establish and implement the necessary government structure. The rest is details as to why we've done that, and perhaps add color to the fact that we can consider other governance structures if necessary, but we have what's necessary to get it done right.
I would agree in general. I mean, we do have a structure here. It is getting us moving, or we are moving forward. I think in the long run, we're going to have to adjust or change our structure to accommodate the programs and things that come up as we move forward towards sustainability. But I think we can include some sort of language that reflects that. But I would agree that it has been implemented, and it just will probably need refinement, as all things do as time goes on.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. Recommendation 5, the GSA should intensify outreach to solicit public input and educate residents and property owners, particularly those whose wells have run dry. Outreach should include the development of a collective single website for the PBCC.
We have one under the county, don't we, Mr. Reel?
We do. We have a website on the county's groundwater sustainability department website for the PBCC and the Paso Basin. It isn't I think some of the other GSAs also have information about what's going on in the basin. So there's probably multiple points of sources of information through the web. But yeah, the county would be probably the primary web source of information.
So the color to add there would seem to me to be that outreach has been established, outreach is being intensified, it can be intensified more, and we have a website. But I would check the first box and explain where we are and more about where we're headed.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, as far as San Miguel is concerned, our website directs people that want to know more about the PBCC to the county website. I think as long as we're all showing the same sort of message, that the county website not only has PBCC information, but also people can get other information regarding well information, permit information, everything that they would generally need if they're having an issue with their wells, which is the purpose of this. So I would say that the first box is appropriate and that we probably just need to coordinate our outreach efforts between agencies to ensure that the same message is being given.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Recommendation 9 for the 2025 GSP annual update. The cooperative committee should update the GSP timeline to show a realistic and deliverable set of management actions.
Second box.
I would just make a comment, and that is that in the 2025 GSP evaluation that we're getting ready to focus on, the guidance we're expecting from DWR and what we learned in the Sigma Symposium a few weeks ago is they really want to, DWR is very, very interested in how the implementation is working. And that's what they want to see in the evaluation. So I think this really sort of goes to that is when we do the evaluation, we will focus on explaining, how implementation is going, what successes are we having, what obstacles have we encountered, but that's really what they want to see. They don't want to see, we will update the science as necessary, but they really want to understand how implementation is working. So I think that kind of goes with what they're asking for here, to show a realistic timeline and set of management actions. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. I think that draft response is fine. So any further discussion? I think we've drafted responses here. We're not approving anything today, but we will see these collected in one spot and brought back and refined at our next meeting, which I think later in the agenda we should
I thought the
schedule.
grand jury did a pretty good job coming up with these points, because these are not all water people or farmers or anything else. I gotta give them credit. It's distilled down to a lot of all the things we are thinking about and working on. So it's not always the most fun list to go through, but it is definitely a lot of high points what we need to work on.
Yeah, agreed.
What I heard in the report mostly was, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up.
Right.
That's kind of what I was reading into this more than anything, which the GSP already has a timeline on what we're doing, and we are going by what the state guidelines are telling us to do. Right. So it's not like, yeah, we'd all like to get there quicker, but it takes time.
Are we ready to move on?
Yeah, so let's move on to the next item, item 15. We took public comment prior to the discussion.
Yeah.
So
once all this is wrapped up,
and
coming back to a regular board,
it will come back to a public meeting. Yes. We did ask for comment prior to the discussion on item 14. Yes. So I'm now asking for Mr. Ely to introduce item 15, and then we'll take public comment on item 15.
Thank you, Chair. So item 15 is the blended water supply project TAC has met a number of times, and the outcome of those meetings and that work is that we've developed a draft RFP, request for proposals, to perform or to bring on a consultant to perform a feasibility and engineering study for the project. So this would be the kind of the first major initiative to move this project forward. The draft RFP is in your packet for your review. kind of again, the work that we're asking the consultant to do would be to do a very, very comprehensive engineering and feasibility study with an outcome of developing recommendations for what that project should look like to move forward into the design phase and ultimately, hopefully, the construction phase. Down in the lower left-hand corner of that slide is the RFP schedule. You can see there's a number of different milestones there. The big one would be if the RFP goes out, proposals would be submitted roughly a month from now in August 28th. There would be a period of evaluations of those proposals. That would be by the GSA staff. And then if appropriate, there might be a short list of those consulting firms that would be identified for interviews. Those interviews likely would be in front of this body. And then ultimately a selection would be made of the consultant team with the intent of issuing a award by October 13th. Because we're anticipating the contract amount to be greater than one of our purchasing thresholds. If it goes above that amount, we would have to bring that contract in front of the Board of Supervisors because the county will be the contracting entity. We are anticipating the November 7th board meeting for that. If we can get it ahead of time, on an earlier meeting, great. But that's the way the timing looks like right now, with a notice to proceed to be anticipated to be issued in November 8th. And then the time frame for the study and development of the engineering report would be 6 months. So 6 months after November 8th, we would expect that project to be completed. Yeah. Okay. That's my report.
Okay, thank you. Public comment on item 15. Any online?
No.
Okay, so seeing no public comment, bring that back to the board. Any discussion?
I don't think there's a discussion. Let's just keep one thing. No, I think this is a real key. I mean, I got to go to one meeting because I was interested in it, I guess, and it was at the it was at the the public building where the have the pool and that. In any event, it was a day where there were not many people there, and so on. But there's a lot of aspects to this thing that we ought to really look at, and I want to make sure I'm not on a committee where I suggested is that you really get into a lot of aspects like how long will city water be available, or could the study say in order to build this you better have water for 15 years, 20 years, 25. I mean, that all needs to be figured out because otherwise we're going to build this whole thing and we don't have any water. And that was a lot of trouble to build a big project. I don't know what we're going to use it for. So there's a lot of aspects of this thing. I hope it gets into the actual final study because it's going to be key to figuring whether you make this thing work. Do you need storage along the way? I mean, there's lots of things that are actual engineering, and it's hard to put it all into the initial order. It was a fairly long meeting, even though there were 3 people there working on it. But it's a lot of implications of these things. Everybody's going to be on the same page if this is going to work.
So
I came up with anyway.
Yeah, I think this RFP is comprehensive and thorough, and I didn't notice anything missing from it that we would want to include. This is obviously a process where we would be right now directing staff to issue this RFP. The proposals would come back, be reviewed by the TAC, come to us for approval as laid out on Mr. Reilly's timeline here. So all we're approving today is that this request for proposal be issued, and I think it's comprehensive and thorough. But if there's any, okay, I would entertain.
Take that emotion. Oh, why don't you make the motion?
Okay, I move that we issue this RFP.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do
Opposed? Abstain? Okay.
Just in process, do we need a roll call on that, or should we just record a unanimous?
I'm able to capture all that. If I hear a dissension, then I'll note that for the percentages, but that's passed with 100%. But I'm tracking that. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to item 16. The one version of the agenda says really, one says turn time.
Looks like mine says really.
So I can introduce this. I think, you know, it is the consensus that I've heard from some of the tax sounds like that there's the understanding is that the tax are tasked with developing the technical basis for each of these programs, and that the funding for these programs, if there's going to be funding that's from an extraction fee assessed to pumpers above a certain threshold, that's really a program that transcends the specific tax. And I think there was frustration at some of the tax that, you know, they were maybe being asked to figure out how to fund things, but a comprehensive funding solution would be more appropriate and should be developed at the PBCC level. And so I think that concept makes sense to me. I think, you know, the place to start would be directing staff to create an RFP, not to issue it, but to create it, much like the RFP that we saw from the blended water project in our packet. And so that at our next meeting, we could review a draft RFP, make sure that it includes all the items that we think are important, and then issue it and conduct a fee study or a rate study that would be the responsibility of this body, not of any of our tax. So I to maintain protocol here, I think let's take public comment on this topic before we have a board discussion. So any public comment on item 16?
When you're considering the multi-benefit irrigated land repurposing program, for a while now, I've been entertaining the idea of why not take vineyards and put 10% of certain size vineyards above certain size vineyards in dry farm. I didn't say not to farm. I just said convert it from irrigated farming to 10% above 10 acres, let's say, to dry farm. People who blend wine, which seems to be the current genre, buy dry farm grapes every year. All the dry farmers around here sell out all their grapes. Why aren't the people who have the irrigated vineyards, who are using water and dropping grapes, switch a percentage of their vineyard to dry farm? And I'd like you to consider that under multi-benefit irrigated land repurposing program, because that would save the vineyards from fallowing land and other irrigated crops as well. If they want to put something in along with their irrigation that's dry farm, there's a benefit to be received by all.
Thank you.
Hi, Matt Merrill. I'm on the TAC for the blended water. And let's see, I think this thing didn't restart. Anyways, I just want to speak on the dry farming aspect of it. There's a lot of vineyards that you can drive around and see what's dry farm because it's dead. So if you just took 10% and you tried to push it off and dry farm it, essentially you're getting rid of the vineyard. It depends though, on the west side, there are areas where you get so much rainfall where you can do that. And so I think that is a possibility in certain areas and also with certain contracts with certain wineries, but I'm not sure if that's something that this board really needs to figure out is the economics for each vineyard owner and how that they're going to survive for the future. But I do commend you guys for on the TAC with the blended water. One of our issues that keeps coming up is what is the funding? How much is it going to cost? All that type of information. And it does blend into as he said, everything else with the Miller program, just the whole concept as a whole. So I just want to make sure that you guys do kind of go down that path. So then on the tax side, we know which direction to go. It took a lot of work to get it to this point. I think some people talked about how it's been talked about for maybe 20 years. And it's been kind of pushed along slowly this whole time. And all of a sudden right now, our foot's on the gas. And we're trying to push it through as fast as we can. The RFP was a big portion of that took a lot of time to put together. And it was really well done. Hopefully it meets all the standards of everything that we need to make a good plan for the future. But also hopefully we can find out that financially it is feasible, that there is a way to make this all work. And I think besides rural homeowners, ag, the city, I think overall these meetings I think in the back of our mind, we need to push towards what is Paso Robles going to look like 20, 50, 100 years from now? And just to assume that we're not going to use any more water than what we're using right now and just try to go backwards is we're looking the wrong direction. We need to look forwards. We need to figure out how do we save as much water as possible in our basin and then see about if there's other projects that are possible. But it seems like we're starting to head the right direction, and it's a lot of work and it's pretty difficult. But I appreciate you guys being up here, listening to everybody kind of throw their different opinions at you, all these different directions on which way you should go and who did what wrong. But I just want to say thanks to you guys for standing up there and listening to it and trying to push us the right direction. Thank you.
Yes, Greg Graywell, Crescent, thank you. What was just mentioned, I find it amazing. We have a land use authority. Why would you plant an irrigated vineyard where you don't get enough rain? So you could use more water when we have plenty of land that gets more rain. Why would you put above ground ponds that are lined and pump water into them so half of it could evaporate while other people can't use their land? Why would you build 13 more hotels when you're not using all your Nacimiento water and then tell ag people not to do anything? Repurpose their land. I think we need to repurpose a couple hotels. Again, this has been looked at for 20 years. And it's not a taxpayer's problem. The taxpayers here are not in profit sharing with certain groups that want this water. If you want the water, get your easements, build your pipe and buy the water from the city. They're not using it. They dump 5,000 acre feet or more every year. That doesn't even count what Atascadero dumps or what San Luis dumps. They can't use it. They don't have any carryover. There's no state water. When we do get state water, it's carried over so that the South County gets what the state doesn't deliver. We just had the grand jury move $6.5 million that the county had for 10 years in the wrong account from state water sales. They still owe us for 42,000 acre feet of water they took over the last 16 years. The taxpayers have been paying this whole time for stuff they don't get. They don't get the benefit of state water. They don't get the benefit of using the water on their own land, yet their taxes didn't go down when the 2-year temporary timeout won't be permanent happen. And I don't think a majority of the people, I know a majority of the people don't have any faith in certain people or agencies because they look at what happened in the last 20 years. I've been here 21 years. I don't get a grant when there's not enough grass for my cattle. I have to sell some cattle. And then when things are good, I can buy some new cattle. Well, when things are bad and there ain't enough water, guess what? The guys that are using 90% are going to have to cut back.
Thank you. Any further public comment on this item? Any online? Okay. So bringing this back to the board, I think staff is well equipped to develop an RFP. I would suggest that it would be helpful to have maybe a summary of fee structures and fee rates that are being used by other GSAs in other parts of the state. It doesn't have to be a comprehensive review of everything that's out there, but maybe just a summary of ranges of what's done. I think it would be helpful to clearly delineate which will be necessary for implementing any kind of a fee and going through a 218 process. You know, identify the uses of those fees, and they're going to be only, I would assume, for programs that have been kind of approved at this stage. So this is, you know, seemingly specifically for the Miller program, the blended water program. We need to, I think, determine whether it's appropriate for kind of the general administration to be also paid out of that, out of one fee. But I think that's something that's appropriate for to be included in the RFP and have proposals come back. And then I think that the third component would be just how this is implemented and what that schedule and timeline is. So
So the initial concern I have is just the timing. I agree wholly that we need to do this. However, we just released or releasing a RFP for the feasibility engineering study for the blended water program. Well, the blended water supply project, water supply feasibility. So we're really going to need to get information from that to determine what the overall scope of that project is for a rate consultant to say, this is what your rates could be. They could do the initial work of saying, this is generally what we found everywhere else and what we would suggest. But in order to bring it back down to a point where a rate could go through a 218 or Prop 26 or be placed on a ballot for a tax measure, you would have to get a lot farther along in the overall program to get that. Like the city has what they've done so far, and they've probably worked through a lot of these things to get a basic rate structure for the city. But as far as this organization is concerned, we probably need to get farther along with the last RFP that we're doing to get that information for the rate consultant to move forward. I think that we could move forward with getting an RFP together, but putting it out right now might be a little premature.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good point. And I don't think that, I think there's a case for separating the blended water supply project out. And the way I'd make this differentiation is that the blended water supply, as it says, is a project. Miller is a program. And that's useful to distinguish, because in assessing the financial contributions to a project, you look immediately to potential beneficiaries of that project. And so I tend to agree with Kelly that having a little bit more detail about the feasibility of that project isn't a bad idea. And I'd certainly let staff speak to me. But I like your thought, Mr. Chairman, that a fee study should rightfully consider the administration of the management of the basin as a whole, as well as the Miller program. And I think those two things make sense at this stage. And again, I'm happy for other colleagues' comments on that and staff's as well.
So
Go ahead.
well, so I some of the feedback that I think has come out of the tax has been, you know, there doesn't seem to be a desire for having, you know, multiple fees for different programs or projects, or and that, you know, it would serve us well to be very clear about what we're doing, and of course what it's going to cost and what the benefits are, but then have one fee that covers all of the various programs. I think I've heard a lot of feedback that that's desirable, but we could certainly take this in pieces. But I think part of it is, you know, a study could come back and help us answer those questions if they consider this.
Yeah, clearly I mean, we're not experts in this thing, and that's what they do. Basically just break it down and figure out what it's going to take and what's going to cost. That's really what the finding we need to find, you know, to make a decision on. So, you know, I would certainly propose, you know, putting it out, get it formulated as far as the, format of what we want the RFP to be. And then as far as pushing that back and forth to the tax, see if they have further input, maybe coming back with a final draft of the RFP before we put it out. Be good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the action before us is to direct staff to develop
Right.
these comments. And I don't know, I see Mr. Reilly leaning forward slightly, maybe he has a thought there.
Yeah, I think we can, get the GSA staff together and kind of work out what should be included or what should be included for consideration in the RFP. Probably look to do a little research along the way. And then the other thing I was going to point out, and I know Kelly and Christopher are familiar with this as well, is that in the rate study, the rate study probably would lead to a Prop 218. And the Prop 218 would result, if successful, would result in a fee that would have a 5-year life to it. And so you're not having to define everything you're going to do, between now and 2040, and everything that you're going to fund and quantify the cost of all that. We're just really trying to look ahead 5 years, and that's a lot easier to do than looking beyond that. So, but I think we can get together and frame out at least a draft RFP, address a number of the issues that you guys have brought up, and then let you consider that further in a draft RFP.
That's what I was going to mention real quick. I know with Christopher, our city, we can only adjust rates every 5 years. In other words, through a process, and that would probably be the same for whatever projects we do here, I'm assuming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the idea is to take a look at what, there's pretty much going to be one source of revenue, I think, to fund all this work, and those are going to be pumping fees of some sort. And so in order to get a handle on the Miller program, for example, where we're going to be, essentially buying land to take it out of production, you have to consider what that cost is going to look like, and what, and so we need to get a handle on, what the fees are going to be, not just to fund the Miller program, but to fund this whole thing. And I think that's going to really help us get a handle on, how successful are we going to be in the Miller program? What are those pumping fees going to look like? And also help us really get a handle on timing. We're not going to be able to do everything right out of the gate. And so when you develop a new fee or a new rate, you might have a 15 or 20 year timeline that you're looking out. And those projects that might be more expensive or farther out are going to have less of an impact on your current fees that you have established for the next 5 years. So the rate study is going to kind of have a long-term view, but what's going to affect those fees the most are going to be those projects that we're wanting to implement in the near term. But we need to consider everything and look at this holistically, I think, because we really only have, other than grant money, one source of revenue that we're going to be generating. Right. And so we can't just look at the Miller program in a bubble and how much money is going to be needed to fund that. We can't just look at the blended water and how much money is going to be needed that. Otherwise, you're going to be sending, the overliers, separate bills for all these different programs, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. No. So we really need to think about this a little more holistically, and that was kind of the recommendation that was coming out of the tax.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
So if there's no further discussion, I would move that we direct staff to prepare an RFP to conduct a rate study as we've described and bring that back to us for a review, of course, before it's issued.
I'd second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Okay. Moving on to item 17, updates from any member GSAs, optional, especially at this hour, highly optional.
And it will be noted if you have anything to say. I have nothing.
Unless Christopher has none, I don't have.
No update from Shandon.
Nothing from San Miguel.
Okay. If we have anything more minutes, we have been working on to see if we could join up with any programs that are out there to help folks modernize their irrigation monitoring or do a lot of these things on a smaller basis, but in our district where there be cost sharing available in some cases is through the ag, state, through the state. And we're trying to, where we can encourage that, we're working on that. Try to get any help that's out there.
Okay. Item 18. I would recommend that we, since we have revised or re-reviewed minutes that are coming back to us, the grand jury responses and this RFP on a rate study, I would recommend that we try to schedule a special meeting at the end of August.
Should we again leave that to staff
I could
discussing?
say if staff needs, yeah,
Discussing.
I don't have a problem.
Yeah, we can send out a poll and work out a time that works for all of you.
That'd be great.
Okay. And then item 19, any future items that we want to see agendized? Item 20, any correspondence, Mr. Ely?
There were two correspondence that were included in your packet. One was from the Sierra Club. Yeah, the Conservation Committee of the Sierra Club. And the other was from the Creston Advisory Body, which was an email. And then I also wanted to let you know, and I distributed both to all the members this afternoon and left 60 copies of a letter dated June 2nd, 2023 from the Creston Advisory Body. This was the first meeting since we received the letter that we could get it to you, to the members. And unfortunately, I did not get it into the packet, but I did bring and confirm that it was met Brown Act if I brought hard copies to distribute and make available both to the members and the attendees all at the same time. So that's the third piece of correspondence, and that one's not in your packet.
Okay, thank you. So with that, let's adjourn this meeting at 6:52.
Okay. A motion?
So do we need a motion?
Typically, yeah, motion to adjourn.
No, it's okay. I appreciate the help, frankly.
I've got.